I'm Suddenplant. I'm here with my friend Markotron.
How are you?
And we're going to tell you about how we came to work on this project, Rapier. But in order to tell you, we're going to have to start at the very beginning.
The very
beginning. Now, we've known each other for how long? 11 years now?
If I remember correctly, we first met in 1999 or 2001. I forget which one it was.
It was 1999 when we first met.
I didn't know you very well, so
yeah, we didn't know each other.
I counted that first meeting.
Yeah, we didn't know each other that well.
We didn't actually hit it off until 2001.
Yes. I think, and the reason for that was we kind of discovered that we were both writers, science fiction writers.
We had a lot of stuff in common. I mean, especially our friend Dan. He is the one who matched us together.
What happened in 2001? I was 15. He was 14, and at that point we had each already been individually working on science fiction series.
Well, I was sort of test running them anyway.
Yes, I mean they're only so good that you can write when you're 15. Most people anyway, unless you're a child prodigy.
Unless your parents own the publishing company. That's how Aragon got started.
Yes, that's right. My story was called The City, and his story was called The 4700 Files. And they both survive to this day in different incarnations, in a way.
Yeah, in different incarnations, forms.
So I distinctly remember it was some sort of bus ride in which I told him about the plot of The City, and it was on the same bus ride. He told me about the plot of the 4700 Files, and so from then on out we communicated with each other on story ideas.
Now, one thing you got to understand is the difference between the different kinds of sci-fi we write. Mine's hard. You don't see very many violations of the laws of physics in it. His is a little softer. It involves things like shrinking and time travel. So, can these two variations on sci-fi be reconciled? Well, it turns out that, oddly enough, yes, they can.
Yes.
And that is where Rapier, or as it was known briefly anyway, Project Rapier got started. It was a middle ground, a compromise between those two poles.
Yes. Now, what had happened was, we've each been individually working on our own works for a decade now, and we never really worked on anything together. Of course, he's always suggested ideas to me, and I've always suggested ideas to him, but it never really amounted to the level of collaboration. Mm-hmm. But then, during the early months of 2009, an idea popped into my mind for a show. Now, this show has a very unique origin, because believe it or not, the original premise of the show was based on a game that my friends and I used to play on the playground when we were 10 years old. And this game that we played it took place on a starship called the Super Neon Bird. Now, what exactly Super Neon was and what it means is something to go into at a different time. But the point is that eventually I moved letters around, and I got two words. I got Rapier and I got Sunbind. Now Sunbind eventually became Sunbird, and that's how I got the Sunbird, a Rapier class starship. Now, the idea behind this show is it takes place in sort of an undetermined time in the future.
The same place Star Wars takes place in.
More or less, although it's not really a different galaxy or anything like that.
Yeah, but...
And the basic premise is that this group of people has invented a form of travel which is thousands of times faster than anyone has ever had before.
See, the current mode of transport is kind of like Star Trek in a way. I mean, yeah, it's faster than light, but there's a limit. And the people at the Rapier Project have broken that limit.
Yes, broken it many times over, where it used to take months or even years to get to other planets. It now takes mere hours. Of course, this has very interesting ramifications. which are discussed in the episodes. Now, originally there were 8 recurring characters, and all 8 were initially based off of people I knew when I was 10 years old, although they've kind of morphed into completely different people.
Well, there are still 8 regulars, right?
Right, yeah, they're the same 8 people, but they in my mind, they no longer resemble the people that they are based off of that much, because they really have taken on their own life. So what happened was, I had these characters, and this basic premise, and a few episode ideas, but it really wasn't going anywhere. It was just like one of these, I have these ideas from time to time, and most of the time they go nowhere. But I told Markotron here one day about this, and he was interested in it.
Yeah, because it sounded like it was actually more like my type of show. I mean, it was outer space. You could throw all kinds of scientific goodies in there, like having actual stars that actual planets have been discovered around as settings. That's one of the hooks.
Yes. And keep in mind, the last major project I was working on before this was a very fetish-filled, X-rated
we don't need to go into that in mixed company.
Yes, but that was what I was working on last.
Let's just say it's a very bizarre reality show.
Yes, and to go from that to this was something very different and something that he could get behind. So what ended up happening in our discussions, he added a number of new ideas. He helped me tweak some of the characters. For example, Anthony became older. He was younger before. A few other changes happened. For example, I didn't have the crews changing that often. Like there are usually only 4 or 5 people on the ship, and I usually had the same 4.
Well, that's just a way of running a TV show. You want to rotate the characters, otherwise.
Mm-hmm. And that was one of his additions. Now, what ended up happening is I had my list of episodes that I had already created. He added some more ideas. Not only that, but he took the ideas that I already had and he combined some of them.
You see, some of those ideas wouldn't really fill an entire episode. They would probably be like a subplot or an overarching plot or something like that.
Yes, so by combining ideas, we had episode ideas. And then, before I knew it, this collaboration was in full swing. It was really, half mine and half his. So we decided to start writing our episodes. Now, it's very interesting how our episodes are written. Like, up until now, I would say this is pretty much the typical way it was done. We'd have our basic, we'd have that outline with the episode ideas, and we'd be talking, usually over instant messaging, about exactly what would happen. And we would bounce ideas back and forth as to, like, for example, if the episode has a ship stranded on a planet, we'd be like, well, why was it stranded on the planet? What's interesting about this planet? Why is this planet different? And the characters they meet there, what's interesting about these characters? Why are they this way? And
it's a way to get the public interested in the show.
Yeah, and it's also a way to flesh out the story. And what would end up happening is we would write a summary based on what we've created.
That's the first step in the process. The first step technically would be the idea itself, the log line, but the summary would be next, right after that.
And so oftentimes he'd write the summary or I'd write it. It wouldn't really matter. Usually he'd write the summary. And then what I would do is I would take the summary and I would actually write out the story, like in narrative form, not like novelized or anything. I don't go into long descriptions of things.
Yeah, it's sort of a draft.
Yeah, a very basic draft. And I would create most of the dialogue, because the dialogue is mostly my kind of thing. And he will take it and he will alter a few things and he will add some, snarky lines. He's very known for that.
Well, everybody likes things that they can remember, one-liners that they can remember. Why do you think James Bond was so popular? Because after he'd off somebody, he'd have he'd throw a marketing after them that people just laughed at. I mean,
exactly.
Or should I say laughed with?
Right.
Besides, you want to have things that people will go around quoting after they see the episode.
Mm-hmm.
Things that stick in people's minds.
Yes. So I basically write the narrative, and he would take that narrative and create a script out of it. And the script would be the finalized product. Well, it's almost a finalized product.
Semi-finalized
because
product.
What ends up happening is...
I need him to go over it and make sure that my version of the story jives correctly with his.
Yes.
If there was anything that he wanted to change, then he'd specify what it is, we'd debate the point a bit, and eventually reach a conclusion about whether or not to keep it the way it is or whether or not to change it.
Right. Usually I check over the main thing I look for to see if he accidentally changed the meaning of anything that anyone was saying or doing.
Yeah, that could happen.
And which happens sometimes, but not more than maybe 3 or 4 times an episode. But generally generally his version is very close, to what I made. And a lot of times it's even better because, two minds working together often creates a better project than one mind.
Yeah.
So at the same time, or at the end, we have a product that has been bounced back and forth between us so many times that it truly is blended. That it's truly blended, and it's really, a collaborative project.
A couple of these episodes, though, were more written by one of us than the other. For example, one of them about essentially the consequences of time travel, trying to patch a hole in the
fifth episode
was entirely mine, and another one about the rescue operation was almost anyway entirely his.
Right. So some episodes are a little bit more one-on-one, but this one that we just wrote,
it was a direct collaboration, head-to-head.
Yes, we were in the same room, which doesn't get to happen too often because we don't really live near each other.
Although we do have Skype.
We do have Skype, yes. And so that one is, the one that we created is probably the closest we've got to a true 50-50 episode in terms of, because a lot of the times I would be pacing around the room saying dialogue, and he would be typing it into the computer and changing it and paraphrasing it.
And then before that, we had the sequence of events, the summary, in which our positions were reversed. He was typing stuff, I was pacing.
Right. So it was very interesting. So we were able to skip some steps, and we were able to combine some other steps together, and when you're working together in the same room, it really creates a very different working environment. But our episode was so intense, and we were working on it for so long. Don't remember exactly what time we started. It was like maybe 8, 9.
Let me put it to you this way. I had a playlist going at the time. It has 76 songs on it. Mm-hmm. By the time we were finished, all 76 songs had run through.
Right. We were working until almost 3 in the morning on this episode, which is an indication of...
Well, if you'd shown up at 6, it would have been earlier.
Yeah. We started about 9, and we ended about 3 in the morning, so that's about 6 hours working on this episode. But
wow, when you say it like that, it just sounds so intense.
Yeah, we created it, but it was quite a product, and it was it's going to be very good. And we have plenty more ideas. I mean, we have 2 entire seasons worked out, more or less.
Well, something like that, anyway. Mm-hmm. 2 seasons with the log lines. I mean, we haven't developed very many of them yet. Currently, we're at episode 9. That's the next in line.
Yeah, so we've actually written a fair number of these episodes so far. It's not something we've written one episode and forgotten about. We have 8 so far, and we're on track to make many more.
Mm-hmm.
So
we're going to post them on a blog or something.
That'd be an idea. Maybe in the future you'll see these episodes If so, I'll make a link or something.
All right.
But for now, we're still working on them and semi-secret. All right. Well, that is Project Rapier, and that's how we got to. That's how we got to make it, and that's what it is. It's very, very exciting.